13 contained. Chaser Gate Room Year 3, Day 67, 1300. Camille Ray and Tamara Johansson walked into the gate room, while Adam Brody dialed the gate. Jin was behind the Kino reading console, and Barnes and her team were ready to deal with any unwelcome guests. The gate finished dialing and the wormhole formed. Johansson took out her radio. Chaser to Young. =// Young here. =/ came the reply. =/ we're in trouble over here. Are you getting our Kino feed? =/ TJ looked at Jin, who nodded that they were indeed getting the feed. She made her way to the console and looked at the feed. The Kino appeared to be in an alien building, and from the looks of the place, it was some kind of clinic or hospital. Then she saw the aliens with the boils and got a bad feeling about what the place really was. We're getting the feed. What kind of facility is this? =/ a bioweapons factory. =/ Young said. =/ something broke out and wiped out the local population. And now, we're stuck inside a containment field. =/ Can you cut the power? Ray asked. =/ we're working on it. =/ Is there anything we can do to help? TJ asked. =/ no. Do not send anybody else through the gate. =/ Young said. =/ dial the Stargate every 15 minutes, Young out. =/ Several seconds later, the wormhole disengaged. Johansson and Ray then left the gate room, while both Jin and Brody gave them looks. As soon as the doors closed behind them, putting them out of earshot of the others, Ray spoke up. I know what the Colonel said, but we have to do something. We have biohazard suits, TJ began. We can put the gate room under lockdown and create a corridor to the infirmary, but until they get back to the ship, there is nothing we can do, not without violating the Colonel's orders. She paused. We'd be risking the whole crew getting exposed to whatever is in there. And what am I supposed to do while you're setting that up? I need you to go to the bridge and take charge. All right, Ray said with a nod. Ray knew there would be little to do on the bridge. Chaser would have to hold position until this whole thing was over. But she also knew that TJ would have to focus on the medical side of this situation, so she would deal with everything else while the lieutenant did that. And it wouldn't hurt morale to have things running normally on the bridge. H4A 701 Settlement Year 3, Day 67, 1311. Ellie was exploring the bioweapons factory with the Kino, looking for clues. So far, he had not found any way out of the settlement, but it was now crystal clear that this was indeed a very dangerous place. They had found more subjects strapped to beds, and they had all looked rather nasty. But they had not died from the same disease. So they tested more than one bioweapon here. Besides the patient rooms, there were also labs and several rooms filled with filing cabinets. At the moment, however, the Kino appeared to be in a supply room. Anything useful? Greer asked. No, he steered the Kino out of the supply room. Nothing so far. Ellie kept searching the building, while Young updated Chaser on things. Rush, Varro, and Volker were studying the ruins and had found a piece of a house that was still standing. Climbing up to top of the ruin, Varro took out a pair of binoculars and studied the building. He spotted the top of an elevator shaft and what appeared to be some kind particle weapon. And a pretty big one to boot. It was clearly there to defend the facility from any unwelcome visitors. There were also what Varro guessed were shield emitters. He climbed back down. There's a big particle weapon on the roof, Varro began. Might be the key to getting out of here. Problem is, to control it, we'd probably have to go inside, Volker said. That's presuming the weapon is operational, Rush said, looking at the building. And then there is the issue of power. So yeah, we'd probably have to go in there, which might not end well. Varro nodded, and led the way back to the others. While told Young what he had found, Volker went to see where the Kino was. Illy had explored the bulk of the building, and it was more of the same things they had seen before. There was no control room in the part of the building that was above ground, but Illy had found a staircase that led to a basement. He steered the Kino down and found 2 doors. Chloe translated the labels, which revealed that one was an emergency shelter for the staff, and the other was the control room they had been looking for. "Colonel," Chloe began, "we've found the control room." "The problem is, the door closed," Illy said. "I can't take the Kino inside." "Well, we were going to have to go in there anyway for this to work," Rush said, while looking at the building. "So what about the other door?" "Also closed," Chloe said. "And that sign next to it says it's occupied, which means that somebody managed to get in there." "But based on the rest of the settlement, this happened years ago," Rush said. "So the chances of anybody being alive in there are practically 0, Illy said. "We should still see what's in there," Young said. "If there are counteragents to the weapons, it makes sense that they would be part of the shelter's supplies, and there might be information on the weapons themselves as well." "How do we go in there without getting infected?" James asked. "We have biohazard suits on the ship," Young said. James nodded and looked at the building. Even with the biohazard suits, this was going to be a risky affair. But it was not as if they had much not strike that any other options, so some of them would have to go in there. Chaser Gate Room Year 3, Day 67, 1335. TJ had prepared the infirmary and secured a route there. As for the biohazard suits, Chaser had 20 units in stock, 10 for humans and 10 for her alien crew members. Colonel Young had asked for 4 suits, which had left TJ 6 suits to work with. Joe Hansen was wearing a suit, as were Adam, Brody, and Jin. Matthew Scott would be delivering the suits the colonel had asked for, so he was wearing the 4th suit. The last 2 suits were being worn by Dr. Lisa Park and Corporal Barnes, who were in the infirmary. And they were not alone, because the alien suits were in use by alien crew members with medical training. The gate had been dialed, and Scott was ready to step through. He gave TJ a nod, and then stepped onto H4A 701, which was actually quite nice. But he knew that this was not the tropical paradise it appeared to be. Taking a deep breath, he headed for the settlement. When he got there, Greer and James were waiting for him. They were standing where the barrier was. "Lieutenant," Greer said. =// the suits the colonel asked for are in here. =/ Scott said, while holding up one of 2 duffel bags he was carrying. =/ the other one has extra food and water and some medical equipment that TJ thought might be useful. =/ So, how do we get this through the barrier? James asked. =/ let's see what happens. =/ Scott said. He got as close as he could, then held out one of the duffel bags. The barrier crackled around his arm but didn't stop him. Greer took the bag, while Scott passed the second one through. James took it, and then Scott stepped back. Tilda, the barrier doesn't stop anybody until they are all the way through. Tilda. =/ I'd like to stay, but TJ told me to double time it back to the ship. Made it an order. =/ Scott began. =/ good luck. =/ Scott left, while Greer and James took the supplies and headed for the lab. Biological Weapons Lab Basement, Year 3, Day 6713.50. Young was leading the team into the lab, with Rush coming along to do the science. Chloe was on the team to translate, and Varro was there to help deal with any nasty surprises they might encounter. Volker, Greer, James, and Illy had headed for the barrier. Illy had given Rush the Kino remote so that he could operate the flying camera ball, and they could use it to scout the rooms before they went in. That was presuming they could open the doors. Young and Varro were currently trying their luck with the door of the emergency shelter. Much to Rush's surprise, the door was not locked, but a closer look revealed why. The lock was magnetic. When the power had died after the outbreak, the door had unlocked. Good thing these suits come with built-in flashlights. Beyond the door was another flight of stairs. They all turned on their flashlights. Then Young led the way down the stairs, and they reached the lobby of the actual shelter. The room had a desk with a chair where the remains of guards sat. Beyond that, the room was a semicircle with 4 doors in the wall. Young opened the first door to reveal a small room with a bunk bed, a toilet, and a sink. There were also 2 lockers with uniforms and a handful of personal items. The top bunk was where another guard had passed away. =/== not exactly the most luxurious place. =/== Chloe said. =/== no =/== Young said. =/== shall we see what's being door number 2? =/== He walked out of the room and opened the second door. Young was the first to see what was beyond, and whatever it was, it made him curse. Chloe went into the space next and gasped at what she saw. 14 Attack. H5D 228 Shanty Town Year 3, Day 67, 1602. Vale had sat down so that he could get a good look at the cage. It was old and rusty, without a solid floor. But there were 2 of the youngsters watching them, so digging their way out was not an option. But the team did have trick up their sleeve. They were still wearing their spacesuits. Vale knew it was a risk, but he calmly took off his helmet and sniffed the air. Bit stuffy, but breathable. Then, he nodded for the rest of the team to do the same. As he closed his air flow to preserve what was left in the tank, the others took off their helmets as well. The rest of the team followed his instruction and turned off their air as well. Let's see how they take that. He looked at the 2 youngsters and smiled. The whole thing had seriously freaked them out. They were talking to one another. Then one of them ran away. That got to them, GL said. So now what? Tizalo said. First, let's see how they respond, Vale began. Then we'll take it from there. The young female who was in charge approached the Vale's cage. He was alone in his cage, while Porter had a cage of her own, and G-Yal was sharing one with Tizalo. She looked at all 4 of them. She's surprised. He got the feeling that it had been quite a while since she had seen anybody who was not a Hallyari. Maybe since the fire that killed all those people happened. Which had probably happened the day this place had been abandoned. He decided to take the direct approach. It's been a long time since you've seen somebody who is not Hallyari, right? Vale began. Maybe since the day this place has been abandoned, the day of the fire. You've seen, she shook her head. What was left? Yes, we have, Vale said. How long has it been? It has been, she sighed. Clearly the memory still hurt. Several years. When the mine was abandoned, the guards received orders to kill all the workers, but they refused, so the hive sent a warship and things. Is that when you ended up living here? Yes, they hid us here, just in case. She paused. The caves were empty back then. Over the years, we stripped the place of anything useful and built the town. Except the garage, we figured that striping that might set off alarm bells if they ever came back. So why didn't we hear your ship land? Because we didn't arrive by ship. That's impossible. There's no other way to travel the stars. Vale was about to reply when one of the youngsters came running. He whispered something in her ear hole, and her face turned to one of worry. Then an alarm began blaring in the distance. The young lady in charge took out a set of keys and began unlocking the cages. Soon after, several other youngsters arrived and handed them their weapons. Then the leader turned back to Vale. My name is Z17H, but everybody simple calls me Z. I'm Mark Vale and they are Allison Porter, G-Yal and Tizalo. They work for me, Vale said. So, what's going on, Z? What does that alarm mean? We set up a proximity alarm, Z said. It means a ship is approaching, she turned to Vale. Did you really not come here by ship? That's right. He turned to the others. NR1, move out. They made their way to the entrance. It was trip through a darkening town as the younglings put out the lights, so they had to use the integrated flashlights with their weapons to see. When they got there, the youngsters were setting up to let anybody who tried to enter the place have it. Vale gave several hand signals, and the team set up flanking the way in. They could hear people moving around in the garage. Vale signaled for the team to turn their flashlights off, which they did. Z took up a position next to Vale. So, what do you do? Explore planets, do science, help people out, gather supplies, Vale said. So, who are our unwelcome guests? Well, officially, they don't exist, Z whispered. But there are plenty of pirates around. If this were fleet people, you would still be in your cages. The fleet would drag us out of here and throw us in some horrible state-run orphanage. But the pirates, they'll kill us all. And that means I need every weapon I can get to defend this place. Letting you go was a major risk. Letting them in is suicide. Before the conversation could continue, one of the pirates noticed the entrance to the cave. Soon, his head poked out of the end of the tunnel. Vale blew it off with one shot. There was a ruckus on the other side. Then somebody pulled the remains away. They could hear several more pirates coming down the tunnel. They fired several shots through the opening, but those hit nothing but dirt. There was a pause before more pirates came through. Fire, Z yelled. There were 5 pirates, who all found themselves on the receiving end of a wave of arrows. 3 of them were dead, while the last 2 were finished by Porter and Gial. Vale and Tizalo quickly dragged the corpses away. The pirates didn't just have hand weapons, but were also carrying grenades. Vale collected these, then pulled the pin on 2 of them. He threw them into the tunnel with all the force he could muster. They exploded on the other end. Why didn't they think off that? Porter asked. Because they're pirates, Vale said. If they were smart enough to join the fleet, they wouldn't be here. There's that. It was at this point that there were curses heard from the other side of the tunnel. Then a grenade was tossed through the passage. But whoever had tossed it had been a little too eager. The grenade sailed past the defenders and took out one of the huts. Before they could throw another one, Vale fired a burst into the tunnel. Tilda, we can keep exchanging fire like this forever. Tilda, they needed to break this stalemate. The problem was that the tunnel was the only way in or out. Tilda, time to get creative. Tilda Vale inspected the wall around the tunnel. As he did so, Gial and Tizalo fired more bursts into the tunnel. Porter threw several more grenades at the pirates. From the cursing and screams, Vale got impression that they had just taken out several more pirates. We're down to 2 grenades, boss, Gial said. If you have any great ideas, now would be the time. Vale was about to say that he had nothing when he noticed a duct. When a ship landed in the garage, its engines heated the place up. So to keep the people inside from being boiled alive, the Halliery had installed several ducts to channel the heat out of the room. It was much bigger than the tunnel, but its location made it impractical for everyday use. Fortunately, whoever had designed the spacesuits had been a sharp cookie. They had figured that climbing might be required, so there were retractable pins in both the hands and feet. There were also servos and motors to help carry the load. Tilda probably for climbing on planets with higher than Earth gravity. Tilda using the suit, Vale climbed to the duct. Tilda, whoever designed this thing deserves a promotion. Tilda, he made his way to the other end of the duct. Looking down into the garage, he saw that there were 4 pirates left. They were huddled behind their spacecraft, which was a miserable old rust bucket. Tilda looks like a Frankenstein starship. Tilda, the ship had apparently been patched together with whatever the pirates could get their hands on. Between the Frankenstein and the tunnel was a bloody mess that had once been at least 4 pirates. Tilda, time to make my move before they make theirs. Tilda. There was a circular tunnel that connected all the heat tunnels. Vale ran down this, making his way to a better position. As soon as he got there, he opened fire. The pirates went down before they even realized what was going on. Vale jumped on top of the pirate ship and scanned the room. But he was alone. He made his way to the tunnel entrance. "All clear." "Yes, sir," Ji-Yal replied. Vale looked at the garage. The place was quite the mess, but at least the youngsters would still around to clean it up. H5D 228 Shanty Town Year 3, Day 67, 1705. While the rest of the locals were clearing up the mess in the garage, Z had given the team a tour of the shanty town. Simply called home by those who lived here, the settlement was home to about 200 Halyari offspring. No offspring had been born there yet, and the smallest natives were 3 years old. This had given them a rough date on the massacre. As they had toured the place, Vale had realized that there was more material here than could have possibly been salvaged from the quarry and the rooms surrounding it. He was also suspicious about the timing of the pirate attack. It was too neat, too lucky. As soon as the tour was done, he shared his hunch with Porter. "You're thinking it was a test," she began. "But how could they arrange for the pirates to show up? And if they're in league with them, why let us kill them? It just doesn't make sense." "I don't have all the answers. Just keep your eyes open." "You..." That was as far as she got before one of the locals came running past. Z was further down the street, talking to Tizalo and Ji-Yal. The other local said something to Z, and the two of them ran off. Vale nodded, and the team followed them. Z and her companion had run into the largest structure in the shanty town. It was the closest thing the place had to City Hall. There were several rooms inside, with the one where they found Z appearing to be a tactical headquarters. There was a control panel that was tied into the sensors and the proximity alarm that Z had mentioned. But what was more interesting was the presence of what was clearly a beacon/transmitter. Tilda so, it was at test. And that is how they got the pirates here when they needed them. They send a burst, which got the pirates' attention. Tilda he gave Porter a look, then looked at the display. It reminded Vale of a radar screen. And that radar screen showed a pair of dots approaching the planet. "More pirates." "No," Z began. "Pirates have to scrape together their components, so their ships are never that big." "Great. Looks like we're about to get some Navy visitors." The ships had probably been on the hunt for the pirates when they had been lured to the planet by the burst. "Tilda, this is going to be nasty." Tilda he looked at Z and saw that she knew what this meant. They were in for a much tougher fight. 15 Escape and Consequence. Biological Weapons Lab Emergency Shelter Year 3, Day 6713-53. They had entered the second room in the emergency shelter, and what they had found inside had shocked Chloe. The room they were in was a large chamber filled with table and chairs. Beyond that were several doors that appeared to lead to bedrooms. But that was not had shocked her. There were several corpses in the room, and they had energy weapons in their hands with nasty wounds on their bodies. It was pretty clear that they had turned on one another. Moving carefully, Young made his way to the bedrooms. There were more bodies inside. =/== What happened? =/== Chloe asked. =/== They ran out of food. =/== Varro said. There was a small kitchen in one corner of the room. And beyond that was a door, which Varro had opened to reveal what had been the supply locker. There were 2 more corpses in there and no food or water, just empty shelves. =/== After that, they turned on one another. =/== Varro said. =/== Let's go. =/== Young said. They left the room and made their way to the third door in the lobby. Rush opened the door to reveal with generator room. There were 4 generators, with all 4 being dead because they were out of fuel. This left them with the last door. Varro opened the door, and they found the bathroom of the complex. =/==, where's the research? =/==, Chloe asked. =/=, we're missing something. =/=, Rush said. =/=, they wouldn't leave it behind. =/=. Rush went back into the generator room. When he got the back wall, he noticed a mark on the floor. Looking around, he noticed a big red button that was not wired into the generators. He pushed the button and waited. After a couple of seconds, the back walls slid aside. Beyond was another flight of stairs. =/=, cliché. Anyone =/=, Varro said. Rush led the way down the stairs. It ended in a square room. There was another generator, which was fully fueled. Rush engaged it and the lights came on. This revealed a room full of boxes on shelves. Chloe opened one of them to reveal a row of folders. She took one out and opened it. There was halire text inside, accompanied with illustrations. The pictures made it clear that this were medical texts. =/=, this is it. =/=, Chloe said. =/=, but getting all of this back to the ship is not going to be easy. =/=. There were dozens of boxes on both sides. Beyond the boxes were several freezers with samples. These appeared to have a generator of their own, and they were still working. Fortunately, there was a cooler box among medical equipment that TJ had sent along. Next to the freezers was an empty shelf. Varro put the cooler box on that shelf, and they got to work on selecting samples from the freezers. H4A 701 Settlement Year 3, Day 67, 1442. While the others were inside the lab, Illy and company were waiting at the barrier. To pass the time, they had been taking a closer look at the ruins. It turned out that the collapse of the town was not entirely natural. They had found several ruptured gas pipes, which had destroyed a couple of the buildings, and there had clearly been several large fires. There was also a large crater that had once been a metal building. They could see this from the chunks of metal that were embedded in the walls of the surrounding buildings. "What do you think?" James said. "An armory." "Definitely," Greer said. They had found enough pieces of debris to figure that out. Illy and Volker were nearby, going through what was left of what appeared to have been the town's pub. It had taken a beating from the explosion of the metal building, and there had also been an explosion of some kind in the kitchen. "It was clearly caused by the gas line," Volker said. "The blast took out half of the kitchen," Illy began. "I wonder what came first, the explosion out there or the mess in here." "No way to tell." Illy looked around the kitchen and noticed something. There was a freezer in the corner, which was blackened on the outside, but it was still in one piece. He opened it and looked inside. This revealed what was left of a halire soldier. Or at least, what Illy presumed was a soldier based on what he was wearing. Then he noticed that the soldier was still carrying his weapon. Among the medical supplies TJ had sent them had been a box of medical gloves. Illy had taken a pair of them along, which he now put on. Then he collected the soldier's weapon. "What do you have?" Volker asked. "An energy weapon," Illy said. "And a battery. You know, I had this friend called Zach and his dad was an undertaker, and he told me how they had to take out people's pacemakers before cremating them because otherwise the batteries would explode." "Bring it along." Illy pocked the weapon and they headed out. They met up with James and Greer and went back to the edge of the settlement. Illy showed weapon to James and she told him about the metal building. The question that remained was, how had the soldier ended up in the freezer? From what Illy had seen, he had not been injured, nor had he been exposed to any of the biological weapons. Before they could discuss it further, there was an electric buzz from the building. Then the cannon on the top of the lab fired. The projectile hit one of the poles, which snapped in half and crashed to the ground. Then the weapon fired again and took out another pole. With 2 poles down, there was now a hole in the barrier. Colonel Young had given them orders to go through the barrier first. He wanted to keep the two teams separate to prevent contamination. With James in the lead and Greer covering the rear, the team headed out. Ali just hoped that the others would be following soon. Biological Weapons Lab Control Room Year 3. Day 6714-37. The selection hadn't been easy, but Rush and Chloe were pretty confident that they had grabbed the most important samples and research from the hidden room. Colonel Young wanted to send another team back to collect more, but they needed to make sure it was safe to do so first. After the collection, they had headed for the control room. Inside, they had found 2 more dead haliri. And like the emergency shelter, the place was without power because its generators, there were 2 of them, had apparently run out of fuel. But there was a control board, which was tied into all the generators. Varro had managed to divert the power from the hidden room to the weapon on the roof without killing power to the freezers. He had also managed to get one of the control room generators going again. It turned out that the generators were not really out of fuel. Instead, the pump that moved the fuel to the generators had stalled. A quick reset of the pump had gotten the generator up to 30% fuel, which was enough to keep the controls of the weapon going for 3 days. That's the good news. The bad news was that it would take several minutes to charge the weapon. Finally, the control console beeped and indicated that the weapon was ready. Varro was behind the controls, while Young stood next to him. =/=== How many shots do we have? =/== Young asked. =/== 3. So I'd better make this count. =/== Varro aimed the weapon and fired it twice. =/== Got it. There's a breach in the barrier. =/== The targeting sensors also showed 4 dots, which Young figured were Ali and company. They were moving towards the Stargate. =/== Looks like the others made it out. =/== Let's go. =/=. They headed out of the basement and towards the front door. But they were only halfway there when an alarm shrieked. There was an electrical fizzle as power was somehow rerouted and the door's magnetic lock activated. Before any of them could react, there was another fizzle and a display come to life above the door. Varros realized it was a countdown and cursed. Chaser Gate Room Year 3, Day 67, 1450. Ali and his group had made it back through the gate and were now in the infirmary being decontaminated. They were also going to get a full workup. TJ knew that they hadn't been inside laboratory, but she was not taking any chances. She had tried to contact Colonel Young, but there had not been any reply. In fact, the frequency sounded like it was being jammed. Before she could try again, the wormhole blinked. TJ activated her radio. "Chaser to Young," she said. "Come in." The only reply she got was static. Then the wormhole blinked again. Suddenly, a shockwave came through the wormhole. The Stargate disengaged, while the people in the gate room were thrown around like dolls. TJ's head slammed into the floor before the world faded into black. 16. What happened to Colonel Young? Chaser Infirmary Year 3, Day 67, 1635. TJ woke with a terrible headache. As soon as she opened her eyes, Private Vilazzo made his way to her bed. A Nakai male, he was the most capable of the Primian medical team they had picked up at Freedom Prime. In the time since they had left the planet, he had become the de facto second-in-command of the medical department. "Glad to see you've woken up, boss." "I've got to get to the bridge, the colonel." "No, you don't," Vilazzo said. "You need to rest. I know you're worried, but Matthew, Vanessa, and Camille are on top of it." "But..." "Ugh, no buts, if or maybes." Vilazzo held up a hand. "What if our roles were reversed? What would you do?" Despite the situation, TJ smiled. "Tilda, they do say that doctors make the worst patients." Tilda and Vilazzo had said exactly what she would have said in this situation. "Also, I am happy to report that Ali and the others came back totally clean from the planet." No unknown viruses, bacteria, or spores anywhere on or in them. All the tests came back negative. Good. Now rest. Yes, doctor. Vilazzo turned to another member of the team and whispered an order. The other member, Private Hyavo, a male Ursini, nodded and made his way to Enroman 4. It was only then that TJ realized that she was hooked up to one. Tilda looks like a perfect stick, probably got it on the first try. Tilda Hyavo replaced the bag of saline. Then he took out a syringe and injected something into the line. Soon, she felt herself floating away. Tilda exactly as I would have played it. Tilda, she smiled and then slept. Chaser Bridge Year 3, Day 67, 1635. Camille Ray was in the command chair. Scott was actually in command, but he wanted to be behind one of the control consoles. Scott was in the middle, with James covering the left station and Greer on the right. Meanwhile, Illy had manning one of the side consoles in the back. At the moment, Chaser was heading for H4A 701 at maximum speed. After the shockwave, they had checked the telemetry on the planet Stargate. The sensors said the gate was still there, and it was still there in the list of gate addresses. But when they had tried to dial the planet, they last chevron had not locked. So Scott had come up with Plan B, which was to get there the old-fashioned way. Tilda, what happened down there? Tilda, the radio came to life, and Private Vilazzo gave Ray a progress report from the infirmary. Good news, TJ just woke up, she began. She's sedated now, but she'll be fine. What about Brody and Jin? James asked. They're in the gate room, helping Volker with dissecting the telemetry the Stargates send back when it didn't connect. Good, Scott said, while turning his chair around. The more people we have working on this, the better. He turned back to his console and went back to work. They needed to get that planet as soon as possible and find their team. Tilda, we don't leave our people behind. Tilda, one way or the other. Biological Weapons Lab Basement, Year 3, Day 6714-42. It turned out that the countdown was tied to a lockdown protocol. It had begun with the main entrance, which had been magnetically sealed. Then all the windows had been secured by force fields before the system began closing doors and pumping the air out of the rooms. The only area not affected was the basement, so the team had retreated back there. It had been close call, with the door to the basement closing a mere 2 seconds before the countdown ran out, which had been just now. So now what? Chloe asked. Let's see what's happening in the control room, Young said. They made their way to the control room. The control room monitors showed the rest of the lab, but no views of the outside. Varro had seen that there were cameras on the outside of the building, so he sat down behind the controls and hit several buttons. Chloe watched as the screens changed to reveal the wrecked town outside the building. There was no sign of Illy or the others. Tilda, at least, were now sure they made it out. Tilda and the breach they had made in the force field was still around. But that where the good news ended. Because there was no way for them to get to the Stargate. Which meant that, unless they came up with a way to breach the lab, they were fated to run out of food and water. Tilda, unless we run out of air first. Tilda, fortunately, one of the sections was a computer that calculated how much air they had left. It said that they still had enough air for 3 weeks. Tilda, so, that's not a problem. Tilda, but they still had to get out of here. So, how are we getting out of here? Chloe asked. Well, we're not using the weapon, Varro began. It's offline and I can't turn it back on. It looks like the breach triggered a safety protocol. Yeah, Rush said. Probably more than one. We're going to have to do something drastic to get out of here. What about the generators? Young asked. Can you shut them all down? I'll see what I can do. Rush sat down behind one of the control panels and got to work. Soon, all but one generator were shut down. He tried to shut down the last one, but the console asked for a password, which he didn't have, so he would have to get creative. It took a bit of searching, but he managed to find a menu and a list of options and functions. Then he saw one of the functions and had an idea. He opened the screen and began typing. Chaser Bridge Year 3, Day 67, 1803. Chaser had dropped out of FTL and was now entering the solar system that was home to H4A701, or the area where the solar system containing H4A701 used to be. All there was left now were small pieces of rock and two dead hulks that had once been stars. But there was no sign of the bioweapons lab or the Stargate. "What the?" Camille said as she looked at readings. "The whole system is," Illy began, "just gone." Camille left the command chair and made her way to Illy's console. She looked at the display and saw that even the biggest rocks were only half the size of the Chaser. But then she noticed a subspace signature in the middle of a cluster of rocks. She turned to Illy. "Is that the Stargate?" "Hang on." Illy hit several keys and there were several beeps. "Yeah, the computer says it could be, but there's something off about the reading." "Sounds like we should take a closer look," Camille said, while looking at Scott. He nodded and set a course. Camille turned back to Illy's console. She tried not to think about Colonel Young and the others, but she knew the chances of them having survived this were not good at all. Biological Weapons Lab Basement, Year 3, Day 6714-49. It had taken a bit of doing, but Rush had found a way around the password that was keeping him from shutting down the final generator. He had tablet computer in his backpack, which had a password cracker on it. With a bit of fiddling, he had managed to connect the tablet to the control panel. Then the password cracker had begun doing its thing on the generator password, and now it was finishing the job. There was a beep, and a light turned green. Rush flicked the switch for the last generator. The lights, controls, and monitors died. There were also clicks as the magnetically sealed doors unlocked. Finally, there was a rush of air as the force fields came down and atmosphere flowed into the building. "Time to go," Young said. Before they could head out, however, one of the screens came to life. It showed another countdown. The team bolted from the basement towards the front door. 10 seconds later, the world blew up. Chaser Bridge Year 3, Day 67, 1810. Chaser had reached the place where the Stargate should be, but there was no Stargate. Instead, there was a cube of metal with 2 holes in it. Attached to this cube was all sorts of machinery built for some unknown purpose. As Illy scanned the cube, he realized that the holes were not holes. Instead, they were the top of a missile silo. His scans also showed that both missiles had been launched. As he traced their trajectories, an idea formed in his head. "No way," he muttered. "Illy?" Camille asked. He left his console and began checking things on the other stations. As he did, his surprise grew. Finally, he turned to Scott. "They've got Soren probes," he began. "That's bad. That's, like, really bad." "What's a Soren probe?" James asked. "In Star Trek Generations, the bad guy is this alien dude called Soren, and he has these probes that he can launch into a star, making them go supernova." He paused. "It appears that they've figured out how to do that, which is like super bad." "So what about the Colonel and the others?" Camille asked. "Are they?" She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. And even if she had, Illy was still moving around the bridge, checking readings. So it was very likely that he would not have answered it anyway. Then he saw something on one of the consoles and bolted from the room. Camille gave Scott a look, then followed him. She found Illy in the gate room, where he was talking to Jin, Brody, and Volker. "Illy, I think I know what happened to our team," he began. "And we can get them back, but we'll have to hurry, and I'll need Jin and Dr. Perry to help me with the math." "You go to the bridge, get started," Camille said. "I'll have Dr. Perry meet you there." Illy nodded, and he left with Jin in tow, while Camille grabbed her radio and contacted Perry. As soon as that conversation was over, she turned to Volker and Brody. "Stay here. Whatever Illy's plan is, it might involve the gate. If it does, I want you here to dial the second we need to. You got it, Volker said. Camille nodded and headed out. Chaser Corridor Year 3, Day 67, 1815. Amanda Perry walked onto the bridge. In the past couple of weeks, she had been getting up to speed on Chaser and Primian technology. And with her knowledge of hyperdrives, she was the de facto chief engineer of the ship. So she had been spending most of her time in Chaser's engine room. She had heard about the team, including Nicholas, going missing. It had put knots in her stomach, but there had been nothing for her to do. Until now. Ellie, she began, what do you have? Lepton radiation. He pointed to a section of his console, which showed a grave with a clear spike. I've been reading SGC reports off the DSI to pass time, he paused, and the only times they mentioned lepton radiation. Phase technology. The Ballard crystal skull and Merlin's research device. Exactly, Ellie said. That would explain why we didn't detect the launcher and where the gate went, and why the network keeps saying that the gate is there, but we can't connect to it. The subspace link is intact, but the wormhole penetrates the dimensional wall, Jin said, while noticing something on the display. She frowned and hit several buttons. There was a beep, and then a number appeared on the display. Is it me, or does that mass reading look about the same as the gate? Yeah, I'm thinking this thing works like an elevator. With the gate being the counterweight, James asked. But wouldn't the gate and the launcher fuse together when they reach the same height? She paused, looking at Perry and the others. What? No, you're right. That's why the gate and the launcher weren't in exactly the same position, Perry said. But if Ellie is right, maybe we can trigger the elevator and bring the gate back. She looked at Ellie, but the chances of them making to the gate. Look, I know it's a long shot, Ellie said, but it's this or nothing. Do it. Perry nodded, and the three of them got to work.